All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jen Mascadrelli from the CARLI office, and I'd like to welcome you to the first iShare Alma Primo VE office hours of 2022. Today we have a couple of topics. We're going to talk about EBSCO parser parameter changes and an introduction to a website we've created for that. And then we'll talk a little bit about an upcoming technical services Q&A session later this month. And we'll have plenty of time, I think, for Q&A as well. First, as always, we do have some regular announcements and reminders. We do have our slate of office hours scheduled for 2022, the second Thursday of each month from 2 to 3. So this is not different from our previous office hour schedule. We will be doing another lab reports session later this spring. So hopefully some of you will be interested in presenting local ideas or experiences to your colleagues, and we'll put a call out for that soon. Also, we do have our technical services Q&A sessions scheduled for once a month, 10:30 to 12. Upcoming dates, January 27th, February 24th, March 24th, April 28th, and May 26th. On January 27th, we're going to be talking about duplicate records cleanup forum, which is something we'll be introducing later this hour. Registration for these sessions is open and available on the CARLI calendar. Also, as always, we have our Let's Talk About Fulfillment, Alma, not Life's Purpose sessions. These are scheduled for every other week, alternating between Tuesday mornings at 10:30 and Friday afternoons at 2 p.m. And registration for these sessions is also open and available on the CARLI calendar. Just linked in the chat. So without further ado, we're going to switch over to Denise, and I'm going to let her talk about the new documentation that we've just announced yesterday. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Denise share.
Thanks very much, Jen. I'll just go ahead and start sharing. Can everyone hear me clearly? Let me know if anything goes wrong. Technically, it wouldn't be a webinar without something happening with the tech. So, okay. Alma and Primo VE are now using a new parser for a lot of the EBSCO host e-collections. And this has been in the works for some time. Some of you may have seen announcements or discussion of this new parser or mapping program to take information from a citation to an article, usually, sometimes other material, but usually we're talking about things like article title, author, the periodical title, volume, pages, date, etc., and then mapping that to an EBSCO host full text collection. So there's a new parser for two main reasons. The actual underlying connector that EBSCO is using was changed back in the summer, and they have some pretty good documentation on the EBSCO Connect website about their new open URL connection, including, if you're curious, it's the OPID, which I'll talk about in a minute. They identify it as either the opaque profile identifier or the opaque identifier. We'll come back to that in a minute. So Alma needed to catch up with this change at EBSCO host. And then also the existing EBSCO host linking was not working terribly well, particularly for libraries using Open Athens. So I'm sure that will come as a shock to absolutely none of you that linking between sources like Primo VE or Google Scholar, it doesn't always work perfectly 100% of the time. So part of this new parser, which is called, the new parser is called EBSCO host journals. Part of it is to include identifying information in your Alma collection. Things like the customer ID from EBSCO, this unique OPID from EBSCO, etc. Most of the EBSCO host collections are affected, however, not ebooks. Let me show you here. There is a link. There's actually a pretty good page as well from Ex Libris about all this change, and they have a link to the transition dates for different EBSCO host collections. And if you open that spreadsheet up, you'll see that you get a list of collections like so, and then the Alma weekly knowledge base release where this new parser took effect. The bulk of these collections changed either the weekend of December 19th or December 26th, where I'm sure most of you had other things on your mind than trying to keep up with changes in Alma parsers. You'll see that most of these are journal collections or indexes. Most of the ebook collections, the major ebook collections, are not affected at this time. So one of the things that my CARLI colleagues and I did was write a new web page for you explaining what is this change, what do you need, actions do you need to take. EBSCO provided us with information on what was your customer ID and OPID, which we have loaded into your box folders. I don't have any other information than that about those identifiers. You'll need to contact EBSCO if you need to sort out, oh, this was our old one, or which one of these do we use, or I have something different. You'll have to talk to EBSCO about that. And then how do you make the change? And we've also sent you a list. Yesterday we sent a list also to your box folder of which of these affected collections you had active in your institution zone. So hopefully we will get better linking out of this. Hopefully this will be a better experience for your patrons. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. And I think we're going to keep collections to the end. Is that right? Or do you want me to try to answer a couple questions now?
There's one question in chat, Denise, right now, and maybe you can answer this. Ruth Lindeman asks, do you know if they are planning to add the book collections, or are they considered to be working sufficiently well? And I think that means, are they adding a parser for the book collections?
Not to my knowledge. I have not seen a new parser that would presumably be, say, something like EBSCO host : ebooks or the alike. I have not seen that. I have not heard that it's in the works. The Alma staff have been testing this parser since last August. Yeah, I think it was at the end of August, beginning of September, they started rewriting and testing this new parser. So I've not heard of anything else in the works for most of their ebook collections. You're very welcome. And I will turn the microphone over to my colleague, Ted Schwitzner.
Hello, folks, and I'm going to spend a few minutes laying the groundwork here for our upcoming technical services Q&A, a forum. We're going to go ahead and call it, because the idea is that we'd like to have a wide open discussion with all of you about duplicate records. We've been talking about duplicate records for a little while with respect to our own need to clean things up in our catalog, but also it's come up as a big factor in the title reduction project that we've all been engaged in for the last several months. This is not our first time talking about duplicate records. We've introduced the topic during the migration, and certainly right after the migration, last March was well after migration actually, and gave you tips on how to keep the network zone clean during that session, and also gave you the practices for merging duplicates. The two URLs you see at the bottom of this slide actually take you to the pages that describe that session, where you can find the video and also where you can find the merge routines that we're recommending for you when you find a single record or a single pair of duplicates, or could be multiple duplicates actually. But duplicates continue to be a concern, as we mentioned, with the title count, but you know that from your own experiences that the duplicate records can cause patron confusion. You're presenting multiple records to them, and why aren't they all together? What's the difference between different records? But also they can cause a hassle to you during your cataloging in blocking the import of new records sometimes. Duplicate records tend to be a little more complicated than just saying, hey, these two things look the same. So we need to, part of our conversation is to open things up and get a good sense of where the community is on thinking about duplicate records. Normally, when CARLI folks think about duplicate records, we're talking about records that are essentially the same identical WorldCat bib record that has been imported more than one time, such that the same entity is being described multiple times on different copies of a record. But also could include situations where different records were legitimately cataloged separately at one point in time, and someone has come along, usually OCLC folks, and merged those records because they felt that they were not, in fact, separate identities, separate works, so they could all be described by the same record. And a lot of these are the situations that we do run into regularly in Alma that need to be addressed. But of course, there are other situations where you might have duplicate records, simply having records that, you might have a record for a particular title, for a particular OCLC number even, where somebody modified the record to make it describe what they had in hand because there was no other record available for it. Say that, 7th edition versus the 9th edition of something, and you just needed to get something in quickly, or that cataloger at the time, could have been very many years ago even, needed to do that. But also, could be that you have records that one cataloger thought should be different at one point in time, but on a current review using our current cataloging rules and models, you might say, no, these should be the same record. So I would point, in fact, to, as a sort of read ahead for what we'd like people to think about in terms of duplicate records, what is and what isn't a duplicate record. If you were following our recommended cataloging practices, such as OCLC's bib formats and standards, when to input a new record, and ALCTS's differences between changes within document, that give us good guidelines on when you should have a separate record and when you should not. Would we have, and would we want to have, multiple records in our IZ for our actual inventory? And then, of course, in Alma, we have an additional, complexity that comes from the community zone, where there are records in somewhat different states and very, very similar to records that we may have had in our IZs that do in fact appear to be duplicates. For our purposes at the moment, we're not as concerned about these kinds of duplicates, because we can control where they come from and how often we use them. But they will continue to be an element of our environment. And it may be that we have, over the course of this coming discussion and future discussions, better ways of determining when we should use community zone bib records and when we should use records that we bring in ourselves. There will probably always be a combination of them, and sometimes they will even live side by side, but we can also count on Primo VE to help deduplicate and Ferberize them as much as possible. When we talk about duplicates, we also frequently get the question of, how do I find them? The good news is that in analytics, in Alma Analytics, we have ways to locate duplicate records in your own institution. And these are in the analytics, the shared folder for CARLI, then under the resource management folder. And I'll demonstrate this in a few moments. There are two main reports for this. First of all is the duplicate report, duplicate titles by 035A for an iShare institution. And then there's a duplicate titles by ISBN for the iShare institution. The 035A finds that very first category of duplicate where the same bib has been imported more than once. It can happen. There's no deep shame in that. It's a thing that'll be there from time to time. The point is just to find them and clean them up. Duplicate titles by ISBN gives you a little broader view of the situation. It can be used to find things that were at once separate records but now should have been merged. But sometimes that report can also give you some false drops, in part because the same ISBNs can be in multiple records, particularly for big sets of records, sets of videos, for example, or films that are released as part of a set. But also you can get multiple duplicates in the same duplicate report, because most records have more than one ISBN listed. So if the ISBNs in two records match each other, you get those records listed twice. I'll demonstrate that in a moment as well. Otherwise, you can search for things using the Alma repository search. And rather than looking for duplicates, you'll actually be looking for things that didn't link to the network at migration or since. And the reason that many things have not linked to the network zone in your IZ is because when Alma tried to link them, it found multiple matching records in the network. And rather than pick one, Alma says, no, you'll have to manually select one of those records yourself. Usually it means there are duplicates in the network that need to be merged first. In part, this is why don't we have a report for this, is because getting at the 035 subfield Z values in an analytics report is a little clunky right now, and we're working on ways to work that out. But you can definitely see the 035Zs in existing records when you find them. Go ahead and pull up analytics for you now. Are we seeing analytics, Jen?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So I'm right now I'm logged in as Aurora University. So if I go to my shared folders, and then I can see the CARLI network folder. And then under resource management, I can expand this folder open. I see my duplicate titles by 035 for the iShare institution. You can click open to see how many, if any, duplicates exist. Just one pair of duplicates, that's excellent. And it looks like even one of these records has no inventory, in which case this one record could be deleted and leaving just the other record, or they could be merged. It's all, both of those options are possible. If I go to the duplicate records by ISBN report, click open for that. This is doing something I didn't expect, but I'll go ahead and follow through there. We see each ISBN appears, and then the bib MMSID, and then the titles included to show us where they are. And this report, like I say, gives us some, curious results. Not sure if this is a false drop or not, but we have this row here for this ISBN matching in 2 records. One is Bigelow's virus troubleshooting, and the other is USV Microsoft. I suspect one of these records might have an incorrect ISBN, but they could be related in some other way. If we scroll down the list, we can see here are 2 consecutive ISBNs and 4, the same title appearing 4 times. Clearly, in this situation, both of these ISBNs appear in only 2 records, but because both records are matching twice, they appear in the report twice. I mentioned some false drops as a possibility, and I found down here before we have an ISBN listed here that is matched 5 different times, but then it's related with 5 individual titles, which appear to me to be video or movie titles. So it's possible that these were distributed in a set of records or a set of videos, maybe for a specific actor or director or some situation. Suffice to say, this duplicate titles by ISBN report is useful for helping you find records, but the way you resolve them may not always be the same. We do want to continue the discussion on what do duplicates mean, what kind of duplicates we're looking for, but also better ways to deal with merging the records, because we are in a shared environment, meaning merging shared records affects everyone, not just the library that finds it. So what we'd like to see is and hear from folks are ways that we can improve the process or roll out the process so that we can get as much done in cleaning up our catalog as possible, while also giving everybody the information they need to make local decisions or review local titles, maybe to find out whether they've selected the right record 5, 10, 15 years ago, or whether they would have made a different cataloging choice now. Or maybe they are are you fine with the updated record getting merged and want things clean? Or maybe you need to investigate and make sure there's additional details for your copy. We don't have a single answer for this. We don't have a single best practice that we've heard just yet. So we're hoping very much to hear a good conversation from you all, catalogers and other folks that are dealing with duplicate records and the like in your collections. And the good news, of course, is that we do continue to have the catalogers from Illinois Heartland Library System through the end of June, and they're more than happy to help us reduce the number of duplicate records and in the scopes that we define as well. We can focus them narrowly. We can focus them on cleaning up significant amounts of duplicates as well. So that is the preview of our upcoming session. Those of you that are planning to attend, we hope you'll bring your ideas and proposals, And if those of you who are not catalogers and not interested in this, but maybe a colleague is, we hope you'll recommend them forward.
Great, thank you, Ted. We have one question that popped in right as you finished up, and Liz asks, what is CARLI hoping to accomplish during the dedupe process in terms of reaching our goal?
Well, I'm going to put the previous slide back up there because at the bottom of that slide, I've got a goal for what the forum should do. And part of the goal of the forum is to help answer your question, Liz, of what we'd like to accomplish. Because these duplicate records have, they didn't appear overnight. They've appeared over 40 years of operation, really. They slowly accumulate over time for different reasons. Some of the duplicate situation that we have in the network zone is a problem of our own making, based on the way we had to build the network zone for migration. We had hoped we would be reducing those problems, but ended up complicating things somewhat. So our biggest goal really is to try to reduce, if not eliminate, the amount of duplicate records in the network zone, because they do produce adverse effects, either in terms of your daily workflow or in terms of confusing patrons in Primo VE, in discovery, and those are not good situations for anyone. Having the duplicate records also increases our title count, and also creates confusion for linking back to your OCLC holdings as secondary situations, and makes it harder for people to do regular cleanup and updating of records.
Thanks, Ted. Gretchen asked if I could put a link to the forum in the chat, so I did that. That's just the calendar page for the Tech Services Q&A on January 27th, which does have the registration set up on it, and a little very brief blurb about the fact that we're holding this forum for the Tech Services Q&A. We'll kind of put a little more information on there, and also send out kind of a reminder about it next week as well for folks on like the technical services interest group list.
Right, and we'll reshare those slides as well to that page and these comments.
All right, well, we have plenty of time for questions about what we've talked about today, and also any other questions. So feel free to type in your questions or unmute and ask your questions. We'll be happy to try to help.
Jen, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for just a minute, because I got a question from Gail that I would like to try to answer to. Just a second, let me get logged into an Alma instance here. This is Denise again. Here we go. Gail had asked that about collections that ebook collections from EBSCO, and that they don't have the box for the OPID, and that is correct. And to find whether something has that or not, you look up the collection. I did a collection keyword here, EBSCO asterisk, and then if you go to the edit service level, either through this more actions menu, or you can click through from the collection editor, you go to linking, And then in this case, you can see the parser is not that EBSCO host : journals. And this information, the parser parameters, don't look like what's on the CARLI web page either. So this is using a different parser and hasn't changed yet or may not change at all. But if you go, let me go through here through edit collection, additional, go down here to full text service level, go to linking. If it's using the new parser and has the new parser parameters, then there is the potential down here for filling in the boxes. So thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Denise. Lori asks if we're sure the new parsers for EBSCO work and if anybody has tested them. I think I'd just like to say first that I know that Exlibris and EBSCO have been working, I think, for months on this. So I know that that's somebody's tested them. I don't know if anybody who is on the call has tested them and can speak to that. I've seen some tickets go by that people have put in the info and have had success.
Yes, I've tested with a few of the iShare libraries as well, and they seem to work. Of course, a parser can't prevent all linking errors. If there's a mistake in the journal title or a confusion about the years of coverage, it doesn't deal with those kind of situations. Well, that's a good sign. That's a good sign, Millikan folks, that you haven't gotten any complaints yet. Luckily, we're at the beginning of the semester, so hopefully we'll be able to troubleshoot problems before your students and faculty are doing heavy amounts of research.
Liz also asked, we currently use copy and overlay when we pull in OCLC records that we have a brief vendor record for. Is this the best practice? And then we also validate and share / link in network afterwards, which I assume helps keep duplicates low. Ted, I don't know if you want to.
That is a good practice. I'm going to hesitate to say the best practice, but it's a solid practice for your workflow in that you've got records, brief records in your IZ that are not shared yet. You have the ability to control the records beforehand, add the right OCLC number so that you can do a copy and overlay, which inserts the record you found into the record you have, and then doing the share link afterwards definitely is a solid workflow. The only reason I hesitate to call it a best practice is, as we learn more about the system, we also know that the best practices come from you all, and hearing what practices are in place at different institutions, because you are practitioners. You've got the stuff on the shelf. So I think that's a good thing to have in mind. And I think we plan to sort of document that as an approach, and then identifying best practices will be sort of a hive mind situation afterwards. But what you're doing there is a correct workflow and should keep duplication low. Of course, since you have IZ bibs before you link, then when you try to link the records, you'll get notice from the network zone if there are one matching bib or if there are multiple matching bibs, which will identify that there are duplicates that have to be resolved first.
Great, thanks. We've had a couple, Gail has also made the change with good results. Heather's asking about EBSCO links using Open Athens, what errors people were having, and she's wondering if it would solve problems that they're having.
Yeah, most of the time, the problems were that the user would be going from a link in Primo VE to an EBSCO host resource, and they, instead of connecting, I mean, after authenticating, if they hadn't yet authenticated on campus, then they would get a message kind of like what I'm showing you here, this sort of, you must sign in to EBSCO, like it was not recognizing your login at all, or this very unhelpful message that a problem has occurred. And also you may have seen this kind of thing too. This was their former version, this open URL connector that EBSCO had. So luckily, I haven't heard, at least not in the last week and a half, I haven't heard of libraries getting that kind of thing. Some of you have reported getting a sort of, well, we found it, but we can't connect to it, or you don't really have access to this journal kind of a message, which those we need to investigate to see what's going on. Sometimes that's a mistake in metadata. Sometimes that's a linking error. And I see Heather said, yes, that was their problem. And you're right, it was very frustrating because it was inconsistent. Sometimes it would happen, sometimes not. And Lori, I'm very glad to hear that's working for you all at SIU Med. And were there any other questions?
I don't
about
see any about EBSCO.
Oh, Melanie asked, the requirement for adding OPID applies to resources we've added to our IZ. Yes, that's correct. That's correct. The CARLI staff will make any changes needed to the network zone ones. So,
Yes, thank you for catching that. Amy Walker has a question about switching to a new ERP called Workday, and she wanted to ask the Hive Mind about this. They're into the part of the transition where they want to work on automating patron loads. They're a little stuck since Workday is so different than CARLI, which is what you used to use. So they were asking her to check with everybody to see if there are institutions out there with experience using Workday or packaging the integration. We've explored the existing documentation on the CARLI website, but are having trouble applying it to our environment.
Amy, this is Ted. While we wait and see if anybody else jumps in, I just popped onto the Workday website to look at their, their customers that they post there. And it looks like the University of Wisconsin system uses this ERP, and they are also a Primo customer. So that may be a place you could double check. If you want to have a contact, we can probably point you to one or two people up that way. As I look at this list of institutions, there are probably, I see a couple others that look like they're also going to be Alma customers. So you could certainly check with those as well. I'm not seeing any CARLI or any iShare folks on this list yet. Do see a couple of CARLI institutions that are not in iShare.
I don't see anybody else chiming in, but people can feel free to contact in. Yes. And oh, great. And your IT folks, Amy, are willing to contribute to future documentation, which is great in case other libraries are switching that way, which is always helpful. Let's see. Jody asks about any existing documentation for putting multiple Primo search boxes on a web page and getting the second search box to work. She's trying to do some responsive design on their website.
Hi, this is Jessica Gibson from the CARLI office. Yeah, Jody, there is some documentation both on the CARLI website and the Ex Libris website about creating search boxes. And there is, a known, when you've got more than one box on the page, you do have to define separate functions and separate forms for each of the boxes, because otherwise, as the code is being read by the page, it'll only pick up on one. So if you've already got that and you're creating separate ones, that's one thing to look out for. Make sure that there are separate functions and with different names and different IDs and whatnot for each section of the box. If you're having trouble, you can always send it in to us at CARLI support. We can try to give you some help there, though none of us are exactly web developers. The other thing is, I don't know if Hunt Dunlap is here from Western, but he just a few days ago sent in a ticket that he has some search box code that allows you to create a drop down with multiple search scopes that he wants to contribute. So I'll be posting that to the CARLI website soon as well. If anybody else has code like that for a search box that you'd like to share, I mean, you could contact Jody directly, or you could also, send it into support. We'd be happy to post it up on our website as some examples for others.
Thanks, Jessica. Jessica shared our website to customizing search boxes, and Jody shared her email, so thank you. So Bill had a question about copy and overlay, then share versus just exporting an OCLC record to overlay an NZ record in need of an update. And Jody said, I think that was records in the NZ that weren't linked to the NZ. Is that accurate, Ted?
Right. Yes. She was describing, Liz was describing the situation where you're replacing the bib record in your IZ,
right,
and overlaying it that way. What you're asking about, though, Bill, is also possible, but without the share part. It is possible to copy and overlay a record that is already in the NZ, and the copy and overlay option comes up when you use the search external resources option from the metadata editor. This can be a little bit tricky on existing records, because what we know about that process, the merge process when run from the metadata editor, and that copy and overlay with searching external resources, is the source and target records tend to be reversed, or what data gets copied. So it's a little bit better or preferred whenever possible to replace NZ records using the connection gateway export if possible, but the copy and overlay approach is workable if there's some reason that you can't use the gateway export. That's another thing we have to do a little better job of documenting the scenario when you would do that. So.
Thank you. I think we have gotten through the questions that are outstanding so far. If anybody else has any other questions? Oh, great. Thanks, Bill. He says he had the opportunity to go through the CARLI documentation for merging records yesterday, and it worked perfectly. Good to hear. Always good to hear. I did want to say that on our page about the new EBSCO parser, one of our FAQs we put on there was, when the deadline for adding this information is. And I think while there isn't a deadline, the sooner you can get to it, the better, as we do expect it to improve the linking experience. That's true, Holly. The merging process is pretty straightforward. It's the determining if they should be merged that's time consuming. Fair point. If we give it another minute for any other questions, but if we don't have any others, we can roll up early. Lori asks if there will be another update on the title count reduction project soon.
Well, yes, here's a very soon update, and that is one that we've made a lot of progress so far, and our efforts have been noticed by Ex Libris, and we are in the process of memorializing the situation and getting a formal agreement on where we are expecting our numbers to be. We can't say more than that until we actually have stuff in writing and lawyers have signed off and things like that. But we are in good shape right now, and we'll be sharing more officially when we can. Meanwhile, the initiative that we started to clean up data that were loose ends from migration, records without inventory, duplicate records and such, there's still important things that we would want to clean up. And they're in the past they would have just been part of our recommended maintenance practices. So we're going to continue to prioritize them for now to try and get us back to a point where finding duplicates and other problems like this is an exception rather than a regular thing. But yeah, that's where we are right now. And I don't know if Chris Hammerstrand wants to comment further at that.
No, Ted, I think you did a pretty good job. As Ted said, we've had some discussions with Ex Libris, and we're waiting for them to follow up in writing, and that's kind of what we've been told to do by our purchasing and legal team. So we're hopeful to have some more detailed news for you all, ideally within the next couple weeks. So don't hold me to that. It's not coming from me, but we've been told to expect it fairly soon.
Great. Liz asks if there's an advanced search that would show any EBSCO collections that are missing information. We did provide a list of the EBSCO databases that are active in your IZ that need the information that is required by this parser. So I don't know if there's anything else you need to do. What do you think, Denise?
I can't think of any way to do that from your institution zone doing an advanced search. I was just doing a quick look over of what can you search in Alma. There may be a way to do that in analytics to see if, well, are they all set up the same? But if you could certainly just double check the ones. It looks, I'm looking at Milliken's IZ at the moment, and it looks like they've all been updated too. It looks, Liz, like you did the updating on January 6th. Is that correct? So you could also look at the last updated date in your IZ.
The report we gave you, Liz, was those EBSCO databases that are active in your and your IZ that were on the list of
Right.
e-collections that were affected by this parser change.
Yeah, and what I did, Jen, was like search EBSCO asterisk as a electronic collection keyword, and then I was just glancing at the last modified date on the electronic collection. So, but no, I don't know of any way to search for any of those fields in the linking parser parameters, but
Yeah,
you could.
you're correct, Denise. Those are not indexed for search, but they are available in your analytics, and under when you do a analysis for electronic inventory, parser options are part of that, are part of that subject area.
I believe the parser parameters, but not the linking parser parameters are there.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
can tell
it's
if it's
kind of
using
tricky.
EBSCO host journals, but you
right.
can't see like if the OPID is there, as far
Right.
as I've seen. But I think Jen's correct that it's not like you have to search randomly high and low looking for EBSCO ones. We've provided you with a list of those that were affected, so you only have to double check that list.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying, Liz, that you probably did make those changes January 6th. So you can certainly check the ones that have the EBSCO journals. Parser. Yep, there we go. Probably want like collection name and collection ID, Ted. That helps too, to make sure you're looking at exactly the one. So then you could export this and use it to help yourself check it.
Right.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have a quick fix to just check it with one thing?
Yeah, it'd be nice, but one more question. Mary asked Ted if you could show the advanced search to find the records that are not linked in the NZ, which is something you talked about in your presentation.
Yes. So we'd start with an all titles search, and we go to advanced, and then there is a search index under titles for is linked, and we can choose equals no. If a record is not linked, there are two ways BIB records can be linked. They can be linked to the network zone, they could be linked to the community zone, but no is no. So in your case, Augustana has 5,669 bibs that were not linked to the network zone after migration. Now, some of these could be, records that you wouldn't have wanted to be migrated, like if they've got no OCLC number at all, that would be one reason they wouldn't be linked to the network zone. Or if there were multiple records in the network zone that would have matched, then that would be the other reason, and that's a more likely situation involving a bibliograph or duplicate situation. But I can guess from some of what I'm seeing just off the top here, some of these look like maybe popular collection things that might not have had an OCLC number because they were just short-term items, which is fine.
Liz, you have a lot where linked is no, and I suspect that may be items without OCLC numbers, maybe short bibs, maybe
some of the early
PPE.
some of the early Alexander Street press bibs. didn't have OCLC numbers, so.
Yeah,
It's not
so-
a problem you have to solve overnight. You can identify groups and work from there.
exactly. So don't don't panic. I always want to put up like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing. Brent asks if there is an automated process to try to link the records to the NZ once most of the duplicates in the NZ are resolved.
Yes, there is a link records job. And so of course it works on a set of records. So if you have a set of records that you're ready to try to link, then you can run the link records to network job. And the job will also, I want to say it will let you know that records were not linked. So which records those were, and that's something to follow up on afterwards.
All right. Gail says, is it possible to export from analytics titles and bib data for e-resources in RIZ?
Yes. And I've shut down my session, but it's possible you can export any of the data that you get in analytics into Excel sheets. And it's also possible to do other kinds of exports as well. It's just a matter of defining the type of information you want. I would say in this case, sounds like you have a good case for a support ticket, and would encourage you to send that in, and then we'll.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
just going to say.
care of
Gail,
that.
if you have more in-depth query, please do send that in to support. And Liz, just glad to see you're seeing, you know, some ASP portfolios reserves and those resource sharing requests. You know, those are not things that's concerning about not being linked to the network. So, all right, well, we finished up with a flurry there. So that was great. I want to thank everybody for coming to our first open office hours of 2022. And I hope those of you that are technical services cataloger types will be joining us on the 27th. We'll send out some reminders and the information that Ted shared to encourage you all. And stay tuned and join us for another office hours on February 10th. Will be our next. So thanks again and have a great rest of your afternoon.